let's just go ahead. You don't want to hear me talk anymore. Let's go ahead and get it started. We'll hear from our first game, Paul Nierenberg in the draft.
So we're actually going to start with our trailer, and we're going to shut all the lights off for that. I'm going to let this play, and then we'll go into the presentation. Yeah, good enough.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The stage is set for the perfect game here tonight. It appears that both commanders are ready, so let's get this game underway.
All right, let's win this thing. My time to shine.
Lights. A little bit of front light. Do I have an exit bar? Fantastic. Well, all that's coming up. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Paul Nierenberg. I'm the project lead for the draft, and I am excited to show this to you. Slideshow. There we go. Fantastic. So in order to understand the draft and the sort of strange game you just saw, I'm actually going to have to take us back to the beginning. Because in order to understand it, you need to understand the goals and desires that pushed us to make this game. When the draft was originally pitched to me, it was pitched as a tactics game, or a tactical RPG. That's a game where you play as a commander or strategist, and you send units around a field so they can fight battles, and you can watch your units fight from across the screen. They do the fighting for you. What was interesting about the pitch was that instead of making a regular tactics game, we were going to make this game for virtual reality, so that you could not only play as the strategist, but you could also play as the soldiers fighting the battle for yourself. I love the idea of the game, and I happen to be a huge fan of tactics games, but what really got me about this game was not the design itself, but the intention behind it. You see, there are a lot of great tactics games out there. I'm a huge fan of the genre. I've played plenty of them. But not a one of them has ever stepped into the world of VR before. So what was really offered at that moment was not just a chance to make a fun game, but the chance to step away from the traditional designs that we'd all made and played 100 times and break some new ground in a design space that really had not ever been explored. Over the next few months, we found a group of like-minded individuals who wanted to make something new, and we set out these 3 goals. Number 1, we would design something original for a platform that didn't have clear markers of what was right and what was wrong. Number 2, we would prove that VR and beautiful art were not mutually exclusive things, even though we'd looked around the market and seen so many games that had cartoonish graphics or were extremely simple. Finally, We wanted to push the boundaries of what VR is capable of. And by that I mean both the boundaries of what we were asking the players to do in terms of complexity, but also push against some of the design challenges that naturally come with working in VR. I'd like to show you a few of the design challenges that we ran into because they are bizarre and interesting, and we managed to solve some very interesting things. So first, player autonomy. When you're playing a regular game, let's say your average shooter, you can run and you can jump and you can crouch, whatever you got to do, and you feel very autonomous. You feel like you have a lot of ability to move around and operate within the game. But you don't. The designer has an incredible amount of control when they can determine how fast you run, how high you jump, how small you are when you crawl, all these little things. And if they don't want you to go somewhere, they simply put a wall in the way, and you can't cross it. Similarly, if a designer wants to show you something important, be it important information or an important event, they can just grab your camera and turn it, because they can take that control from you. The same is not true in VR at all. Players have complete body autonomy, which means that if you want to take your hand and stick it directly through a brazier, you can, and we have no way of stopping you. For those curious, we're making a combat game, a game where you're fighting one-on-one with swords, and we had to find a way for you to be able to fight a sword that didn't actually exist. So we spent months building up visual, aural, and haptic feedback so we could essentially trick players when they collide with another sword into feeling something that isn't actually there. The second challenge we ran into was VR tracking. So when people who see VR, they just assume, oh, the system knows where you are. That is not true at all. What the system actually does is it takes the position of your headset, it takes the position of your two hands, and it triangulates between them. And what it does is it finds that center point, and it says, oh, this is probably where the player is. So if someone's standing like this, the head up here, it's like, oh, the player's right around here. And it's a pretty good estimation. The problem is, if I put both of my hands above my head, when the system triangulates, it thinks the player is up here. Now, when you have an enemy lunging at you with a sword, and they are lunging 6 feet into the air, it looks really awkward, and they can't hit you. And we had a big, big problem with that. We struggled for months changing numbers, adjusting colliders, and making things bigger and smaller, trying to fix it, until we realized we didn't actually have to use what the system gave us. So we broke it into pieces. What we ended up doing was that we decided to take just the two controllers like this and find the player's direction of facing using only the two hand controllers. And then we would find the distance from the AI to the headset directly, not using any other numbers. And with that, we were able to find the player's position easily because the body turns with the arms, and we could find the distance because your head just can't move too far from your body. And we managed to solve the problem without having to build out an entire new way of tracking the player. The third thing we ran into was UI. So for people who don't know what UI is, these are all the buttons and controls and information that the game gives you. So when you need to know your health, when you need to know the score, when you need to know what phase you're in, UI is how we tell you. We wanted to be cool when we first made this game, so we're like, oh, you're in a headset, let's make a cool sci-fi visor, and we're just going to put your health bar right on the visor. Because that looks awesome, right? We've seen it in the movies. Should be cool. Do not do that. Just do not. The way VR actually works with the headset is that there are two projectors that come like this, and for the world at a distance, it works perfectly. But when you put something like a health bar on the projector, you get an effect very similar to taking your finger, putting it to the bridge of your nose, and trying to focus on it. It will give you a headache because you'll be getting serious double vision. So we said, okay, that doesn't work. We're going to try again. So we said, okay, we will take the health bars and we'll put them directly 2D into the world above the enemies that we're fighting. The problem is that the game updates the visual you see every so often, and the player moves a whole lot faster. So when we initially had your health bar on the back of your sword, if I'm holding still, I can see the health bar. But as soon as I swing my sword, the health bar is here, and then it flickers, and it comes here, and then it flickers, and it comes here. It could not keep up with a real person. So we had to find something else to do. What we ended up doing was completely scrapping all of our UI and rebuilding it so that every piece of UI was built directly into the world and made sense not only with the design and ease of use, but also with the fiction. The thing is, we actually ended up with some really cool things because of this. What you see here on the left is the strategist bracer. This thing actually stays stapled to your arm, and what it does is it shows you the phase of the game that you're in, the score, and it allows you to select units solely by gesturing at your arm. And it works really, really well. But we never would have thought to use your own body as a piece of the UI if we hadn't run into these other problems. The next thing we ran into was real-world space. So I'm going to move over here for a second to demonstrate. If I'm a strategist and I'm issuing commands, I can just point and click and send people all over the place, and that's fine. And when I get into combat, I'll fight a little bit, and I'll go wherever I have to go. Now, within the game world, I can plop the game world, your character in the game world, anywhere I want. So I can put you right back into the strategist slot from here. The problem is, I'm now 3 feet from where I started. So the next time I get into combat, I'm going to lunge directly out of the play space, or worse, directly into a wall. This is an artist's rendition of something that actually happened. A sweet tech designer of ours, he did slam his hand into a wall, which provoked us to actually try and fix this problem. So what we had to do is we had to build a system in the game entirely dedicated to recentering the player in the play space. And what we made was something that forces the player, whenever they're changing from strategy mode to combat mode, to pick up the tool they need. So if I want to go fight with a sword, I have to walk to the center and pick up a sword. If I want to give strategy commands, I have to walk to the center and pick up that strategy gauntlet you just saw. So we managed to solve that one as well. The last one was actually the most unexpected, but was simply hardware. The school had, for the most part, 2 Vives that we could use for the majority of our capstone time. And these sentences will make a lot of sense to the designers, to the actual game builders in the audience, but you can't test anything unless you have a VR system to test it on. So you may think your art looks beautiful and you step in and it's full of holes. You may think your code works, but actually you swing and you go right through the other player. And when we only have 2 things to test on, while other teams are also building VR stuff, it's extremely challenging. Not to mention that whenever we wanted to play test, we, 1, had to schlep a big VR system out to wherever we were going, but 2, could only play test with 1 person at a time. Now this one, we didn't manage to solve this, but I'm very enheartened to know that FIA is actually buying a whole fleet of new Vives for the next cohort, so that at least some students in the future won't have to go through the same bottleneck we went through. And frankly, I'm really happy they are. So we solved all of these challenges, and admittedly quite a number more, and ended up with a strange game, but one that I'm extremely proud of, both for its uniqueness and for its accomplishment. The game that we actually made is a tactical sports game. You get to play as both that focuses on one-on-one combat and clever positioning around a field. You get to play as both the strategist looking down and giving commands, and as the units themselves fighting one-on-one with a sword. You switch back and forth between these 2 phases while you run your units around scoring points. So there are 3 ways to score points. The first is simply getting a goal. If you want to score a goal, you can command one of your units and send them directly into the enemy goal. Seems simple, but the enemy is not going to simply let you walk on into its goal. If they can catch you, they can fight you. Whenever 2 units run into each other, you have to step in and fight a one-on-one battle, and whoever wins that battle scores a point. The important part about the battles is not simply fighting, though. Since this is a sport, we don't kill people. Instead, when you win the fight, you get to send the enemy unit flying through the air. You can use this in order to knock units out of the way. Perhaps there's a unit running to my goal and I want to smack him out of the way. If he's on a path that I don't like, I can smack him off of that path. But if you're really daring, you can attempt to smack that unit directly out of the arena. If you successfully do, you score 3 more points. So now you know how to score, and knowing is half the battle. The other half is knowing how to control your units. Oh, by the way, this is the penalty box. Whenever you get penaltied by being knocked out of the arena, you end up in here. And you'll eventually respawn in this refresh zone, similar to whenever you score a goal, you respawn here as well. The other half is controlling your units. So this is the view you're going to see when we're playing as the strategist. And you can look around and you can see I have my units here. They're each marked by a number. Here are the enemy units here. And I'm looking down and above giving commands. One thing you're really going to want to pay attention to is this reticle around here. So you see how he's moving around. He can point and gesture with his arm to click and send units to places. And they will go to wherever he leaves those commands. And you can see again over here he's issuing commands and letting it go. Additionally, you're going to want to pay attention to these. So these are power-ups that are floating around the field. Health and speed should make pretty solid sense. Your character gets more health, your character moves faster. This one in the middle, archery, is a bit special. We built out an entire second fighting mode where the player gets to pick up a bow and arrow and actually shoot at enemies running around the map. It's pretty awesome, and I promise you'll know it when you see it. Finally, teleportation. So I mentioned that camera work in VR is a little bit weird. You're occasionally going to see a screen that looks like this with these other pillars lit up around the room. This is because if we want the player to get a better view on the world, we can't just pick them up and throw them somewhere else. They can't just hover up into the air to view the entire map. We have to actually move them in the game space. So we allow players to teleport to one of 6 boxes around the arena in order to get better viewpoints. It looks a little bit like this. So if you see the view change a little bit suddenly, like that, don't be concerned, that's them teleporting around. As a final note, you will occasionally see that the game is in timeout, where the units aren't actually moving and the player is issuing commands before things happen. This isn't a bug. You need time to think and send your units out so you can actually make plans. It'll look like this. You'll see timeout up on the board, and the units will get running. The other side is combat. Now, combat's pretty simple. We all know. You just have to stick them with the pointy end. However, we did want to build it out to make it a bit more interesting. So we added a shield here to both help the player defend themselves and help the enemy defend themselves from you. And we also added a special ability to go slow-mo and essentially dodge out of the way or make unique and challenging strikes by getting around the enemy's guard. When you win combat, you're going to see something like this. This unit is stunned. They've lost. When a unit is stunned, you can wind up a shot and send them flying through the air for the strikes I mentioned earlier. However, sometimes you lose as well. That's going to look like this, where the whole screen goes red, you see the enemy strike through you, and your unit gets knocked out of the way before you head back to the strategist mode. And they will score points for that, and your unit will be removed from combat. So that's pretty much it. The game is pretty simple, but it's very hard to pick up when you're just watching it at full speed. There's only one thing left that I'd like to talk about before we go into the demo. And, well, when we show you our demo, we're going to put it up here. What we're going to do is we're going to take a capture from within the visor, and we're going to display it up here for everyone to see. And it's going to look great. It's going to look very cool. But there's a problem with it. You see, for a regular game, a big two-dimensional screen is perfect because those games are meant to be played through a screen. It's a close, if not perfect, representation of the actual gameplay. But the same is not true for the draft because the draft is made in VR. And VR is not flat. It wasn't built for a screen. It neither needs nor wants one. So you're only going to get to see a two-dimensional representation of a real 3D space that we have made. It's sort of like the difference between watching a football game on your TV at home and actually going to the stadium. In one, you're an observer. You see something great happen and you cheer and get excited because you know something great happened somewhere. But in the other, you're not just an observer. You're actually part of the event, and you can get swept up in being part of something awesome instead of just seeing it happen somewhere else. I want you to keep that idea in mind when you watch this demo, because the sliver that you see on screen isn't a true representation of our gameplay. But we don't have time to take everyone in the audience and put them into the headset. But if you think that what you see up here is indicative not only of the gameplay, but also of the hard work this team has put into this game, then you would be doing them a great disservice. Now, I am absolutely proud as I can be to finally show you all the draft.